好，喺團體入
While the deputations are coming in, members, let us deal with 2 items on the agenda. First of all, confirmation of minutes. Members, would you like to make any proposed amendments to the minutes of the last meeting? If not, the meeting minutes are confirmed. Then we also have to deal with Mr. Tam Yiu-chung's application for membership. If members have no particular views, of course we welcome him, don't we? Right. We welcome Mr. Tam Yiu-chung to the membership of this meeting. And we will now wait for the deputations and the administration team to come in before we formally start on the discussion item for this meeting.
好，我哋歡迎
Let us welcome the deputations. Today we have altogether 44 deputations and individuals attending this meeting. And we will be discussing integrated education with respect to students with specific learning difficulties, or SLD, and also attention deficit and hyperactivity disorders. We also welcome government officials. It is a public hearing today, and we will concentrate on students with these learning difficulties. Of course, we understand under integrated education, very often the students may have one or more disorders. But this has been the arrangement for today's meeting, and we thank the deputations and individuals for the interest they showed. In fact, the council meeting should still be held at this time to discuss the appropriation bill, but since over 40 deputations and individuals have registered the interest to come to this meeting, we have decided to suspend the council meeting So you see, you're very powerful. Of course, this is also a very important topic. SLD and ADHD are the biggest groups within the groups for or needing integrated education. Therefore, the number of students from these two groups take up the majority of students needing integrated education. I can see that you have written the submissions very well, and it is shown that you have a lot of experience and maybe not so happy experience, and many of you have worked for many years. Some of you are self-help groups. You have accumulated a lot of experience. You have conducted study tours overseas, and you have made a comparison between overseas countries and Hong Kong. So they are really of high standard. And also you have related a lot of your experience in these submissions. There are quite a number of families which, because of the needs of the children, the father or mother have given up their career. And of course, some marriages have suffered because of a difference in opinion between the couple towards the education of the children with a learning disorder. And some of you have actually sold off your property in order to give the best education to your children. While I read your submissions, I was filled with emotion. I hope that through the public hearing today, you will be able to express your needs for the knowledge of the officials. I hope the government departments can respond and adjust the system of integrated education and also their policies and service measures. And therefore now, first of all, let me ask the administration to take us through the paper and to let us know what they have done for these two groups of students under the purview of integrated education. And then I will open the floor to the deputations, and I must apologize. Each of you will just get 3 minutes. I know 3 minutes will not be enough to include both your stories and your views, but then we have limited time for this meeting. And because of your enthusiastic response, we have already extended our meeting by 1.5 hours. Usually we have only 2 hours, but now we have 3.5 hours. I'll see whether we need a break, but for now, I think we'll have the meeting in one stretch. And I'd like to draw the attention of deputations and individuals to the fact that what you're going to say here will not be protected and covered by the Legislative Council Powers and Privileges Ordinance. I hope you will do your best to complete what you have to say within 3 minutes. Or else, if we have more time for you, then we will not have enough time for the discussion on the policy. So first of all, can I ask Mr. Kevin Yeung, Undersecretary for Education, to take us through the paper? And I will ask you to be concise and precise because we know most of what is in the paper. Thank you, Chairman. I will just go through the main points in the paper. Number one, I like to mention that the administration places emphasis on early identification and intervention. We believe this will be the step to successful assistance. In 2005, the HA, the DOH, and also the EDB and the SWD have already started a comprehensive child development service, which was called the Head Start Program on Child Development. This provides pre-primary institution teachers a mechanism to refer at-risk children with physical, developmental, or behavioral issues to the maternal and child care centers for assessment and appropriate treatment and support. We believe this is the first step that we should take for integrated education. And then as for support from schools and other departments, I think those are all in the paper. And if there is a need to mention them, I can continue to tell you the details. But let me take the opportunity, since there are so many parents here, I'd like to say a few words. different departments understand very well that if a child is in need of special help with education, and also if they have other physical needs, parents face a lot of difficulties, and they also have to do a lot to help the child. I believe parents in this room have done a lot for their children, and we do give you our respect. Now, of course, in implementing policies, the administration has to have regard for the overall situation and the macro situation, and it may not be possible to attend to the needs of each child or each student fully. However, when we face the same problem, the different departments will certainly place the welfare on the child as our first priority. Chairman, maybe I will not go into the details, and if there is a need, I can again cite those points, but I will return the microphone to you for the moment. Thank you, Undersecretary. Apart from the Education Bureau, we have officers from the Department of Health. We have a consultant pediatrician child assessment service here. We also have hospital authority as well as SWD and also HKEAA representatives. This is for the benefit of the deputations. All right, we'll go now into the deputations. First, Hong Kong Association of Squint and Double Vision Sufferers. Ms. Chiu-hung, 3 minutes. Thank you, Chairman and members. I'm a representative of the Hong Kong Association of Squint and Double Vision Sufferers. They are affected whether or not the disability is obvious or hidden. Now, if this is happening after 10 years old, then they would be neglected. In our association, there are 2 types of these SEN students, one in primary and the other one in secondary. And there was a 6-year child who was in a special school, but then in the end, he was sent to a mainstream school because the EQ test shows that he is not mentally disabled. And actually, another one left the secondary school at the age of 13. He knew that he would not be able to benefit from normal education, but this child is now 23 years old. He wakes up and then he waits to go to sleep and then he waits to wake up, and it's very difficult for him indeed. And another one was wrongly assessed to be just mildly mentally disabled, but he cannot actually attend school for more than 10 hours a day, and in S4 he was assessed to be disabled, and he would not be able to get his own CSSA. Even if he gets a full grant for his schooling, he has to repay the loans, and this is what we see happening to SEN students after they have grown up. And as you know, we have different programs for the retired and for other people. But what about these forgotten children who are disabled in their learning? Why is it that they can only take courses as IVE instead of the formal tertiary institutions? Why is there no scholarships or school fee assistance? Why is it that the schools are not receiving the $10,000 assistance? Is it that these students have no value? I would say that the administration should have their salaries cut so that they become accountable to the public.
Next is Special Educational Needs and Parents Association Limited, Ms. TAM Yiu-chung. Hi, I am a single mother with 2 children, and there's one with SEN who is my younger son, and he is 16. So he has several disabilities, and including reading and writing, as well as ADHD. I remember when he was in primary 1, he found a problem. I had to wait for 3 years before I confirmed that he has 4 different disabilities, but we still don't have any support. So when he was in primary school, he had to switch schools, and he had to go to some faraway school before he can have good education. I was reading the newspapers today, and then he also had to take 2 different secondary schools. Now, those teachers over there are very responsible, and he can learn. I suspect that my child can take his education here in a very peaceful environment. So why is it that I should come here? I'm just a single mother. Why do I have to come out? But I have no hope in Hong Kong in terms of the educational system. Our children cannot find schools. I come here, and so with so many other parents. Perhaps that they have high abilities. But what about those parents who are in the grassroots? How can we let them learn? As our children learn? I'm just come here and speak today. My child is 16 years old, but integrated education has been here for more than 10 years. I think that he has been at the forefront of what you have been implementing. So all these officials here today, I believe that you have the heart to educate our kids, but I want to reflect the reality to you, especially Mr. Young, and talking about early identification. I don't think that's real. If that were really in effect, I think it would not be a situation like this. There are some kids who can only diagnose that they have autistic when they're in primary 5 or 6. I was reading the Apple Daily today. I was reading the reflective report today. The assessments. I think if parents think it's so important, why don't you give the assessment report to us? Even though I don't understand how to read it, I'm sure that I can find someone to interpret it to me. And I think that EDB has responsibility to give us information to help us choose schools so that we don't have to keep on switching schools. When my child was in secondary 1, I saw information from you. That's why I let him go to that school. Okay, thank you, Ms. Tai. I hope that later maybe we have time for supplements. Next is Dr. Tony Lai Tai Sum. Yes, thank you, Chairman. In the past, I was working in the HA. I was in the Children and Youth Psychiatry Department. In terms of autistics children, if you look at international standards, they can be diagnosed even before 3 years old. And even now, there are some studies that even for children as young as 2, we can diagnose them. In terms of ADHD, depending on what standard you use, we're talking that they can be diagnosed at 6 or 7 years old. But my personal experience, because I have left HA for around half a year, my experience is that every single time there's a clinical service, that is in the morning or afternoon, we have to see 1 new patient, and maybe like 15 to 18 old cases. If we need 1 hour for a new case, so each old case we can only use less than 10 minutes. I think that's very difficult, even though I have been in this profession for 10 and 20 years. I think it's difficult. It's very difficult to see a patient for such a short period of time. And of course, the time for waiting is very long. Before I left, the waiting time, that is for new cases, and then calculating, and all of Hong Kong, that's 80 weeks. But that's only when they can see the doctor. But a lot of times, for example, if those children that really have SLD or autistic children, besides they need service from doctors, they also need training services. Then they have to wait another 18 months to have these trainings services. So if there's a child who has a problem from the time he is starting in queue for the first time he can have special training. It may take 3 years. And for a child who's 3 years old to wait until he's 6 to get the first incident of training, that's very long. So I would like to ask, is there any long-term planning to help these parents and these children and, of course, society, where these children can be diagnosed earlier and get the appropriate therapy earlier, then they can have a smoother path ahead. And in terms of resource allocation of society, it will also be better, because the older they get, there may be more problems. So if we can face these problems headlong earlier, that will be a better solution. That is what our experiences have been. Thank you, Dr. Lai. This is a direct experience. We cannot wait for that long. Next, we'd like to ask the Hong Kong Association for ADHD chairperson, Ms. Marsha. Hello. I can see that integrated education has been implemented for more than 10 years. But according to the Equality Commission, over 40% of teachers do not want to accept these children to learn in the mainstream schools, and about a half of the teachers who are in the poll do not have the appropriate training. So we can see that teachers, in terms of training and knowledge of ADHD, is not enough. And our association has also still received complaints from teachers about how the teachers do not accept ADHD is a developmental problem, and they think that those children are just bad, and they use detention or scolding to treat them. Or perhaps they will ask them in front of their classmates whether you have taken medicine today, and this will hurt their self-esteem. We can see that EDB's training is not enough. They only ask that 10% of the teachers in each school to voluntarily take a 30-hour course. And they learn 9 different types of SLD within those 30 hours. And the teachers cannot comprehensively understand how to deal with these students. Or they will ask one particular teacher to learn about ADHD. And during the course, and there's no need for the teacher to do any practical training. And they do not follow up after they return to school how they share the experiences with other teachers. So right now, we strongly urge the EDB to look at how we train teachers. That is, in terms of they should have practical learning on how to deal with ADHD students, and they should share with their experiences during this training course with their other colleagues, and it should be a part of their courses, and there should be a follow-up and reflection of this, so then the whole school can be part of the integrated education. Furthermore, we see that within the school, it's not just a few teachers have to face ADHD students. In fact, all the teachers have to face it. So in the long term, 100% of the teachers should know how to deal with ADHD students, and they should take this course. This may take a long time, maybe 20 years at the longest, but we hope that EDB does have this guideline to help these very sad students. And we see that EDB has a lot of guidelines to schools and in terms of learning materials. And this is they only need to use it on a voluntary basis. And there's no follow-up work on seeing whether or not they're used, and such as for resources. Are they really being used for SES students? In terms of and there's no monitoring of other implementations. In terms of it seems that the requirements for being a leader of the support group is very loose. Next is a Labour Party, Mr. Michael Cheng, Executive Member. Yes, thank you, Chairman. In terms of support, such as studies or the societal knowledge, I think the society's knowledge to ADHD and SLD is not enough. And I believe that a lot of parents and professional bodies have reflected this many times. But I have some other points that I want to talk about today. First, the chairman has said there are some marriage problems or family problems that can stem from children with SLD. So in my work, I've seen many of these cases. What I've seen that what our services right now is mainly about dealing with problems for the children regarding of attention or other types of learning problems. But what about the families? We don't have a support system for the families. Is that a lot of studies do show that these families face a lot of pressure because their parents face a lot of different difficulties in many aspects. Secondly, is that the parents, do they have enough knowledge? I think that EDB has the responsibility that when the children are diagnosed, how do we ensure that the parents are adequately prepared to handle this? Are there any proactive support services for these parents? And a lot of people are saying that, talking about teacher training, but I also see that a lot of parents say that in terms of services for medical or social services, now we're saying that there are a lot of ADHD students, but even for medical or social welfare services, they may have a very outdated knowledge. So parents really rely on these professionals' services. So it's really important that they have adequate knowledge. And of course, the schools are very inflexible. That is, we say that there's some multimedia learning, but a lot of teachers are just using old ways of teaching, such as making them copy the knowledge. So I think that's very disadvantageous to the ADHD students. And of course, we're not curing disease. We're talking about we have to handle a group of kids who are have some special characteristics. So now because of this, our society cannot help them, so that their lives are very difficult and their family life have a lot of problems. So our whole society has a responsibility. If we're just talking about, we have to help them with their problems, but then we may have a labeling effect on these children. Thank you, Mr. Cheng. Next is Mr. Joshua Lee of the Civic Party. Hello, I'm Joshua Lee. In terms of SLD and ADHD students, the administration has pushed the IE, and we think that there are some points that we want to reflect. First, the administration has not helpfully diagnosed all these students. There are around 800,000 of these students now. There should be around 80,000 SLP students, but according to my statistics, administration has only diagnosed around 20,000 of these students. That means that there may be 70% of students who have not been diagnosed, or maybe they're learning in an appropriate manner, and some teachers may think they are being purposefully bad. Furthermore, teachers do not have adequate training. There's no enough adequate course, and then they only talk about these issues in a very broad, sweeping manner. Therefore, they cannot help these students with SLD. And then some schools, now there's a requirement that 10% of the teachers in the school has to have the training in this aspect, but some schools do not still fulfill this. And furthermore, there are some extra resources for these students, but some schools use these resources in administrative work or the daily operations of the schools, so that these resources cannot be truly helpful to those students with special needs. Fourthly, in terms of the course design of the EDB, has not given sufficient support for these students so they can find appropriate schools as they grow old. So a lot of time when they have a lot of talents, but then they have to lose the opportunity to develop them. Right now, the educational system has caused a lose-lose-lose situation for all. The students cannot get used to the schools and cannot learn. And some students will not even want to go to school. And our parents have to help their children make sure they are catching up with schoolwork. And teachers do not have the experience and knowledge so that they don't know how to reflect to the school. According to the Children's Rights Convention of the UN, the youth should have accorded dignity, and so that they can have an appropriate living in terms of education and training. So the Civic Party emphasized that for students with SLD must have specially designed education. It's not a benefit and it's a right. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Lee. Ms. Chung Pui Pui. Chairman, members, good afternoon. I'm actually a pediatric psychiatric occupational therapist. Helping a child is like building a building. It is very important to start from the beginning. But with SPLD students, this is not a must. Literature has shown that SEN students, and together with my own work experience, we have found that very often they cannot have enough attention span, and therefore they have disorders. They may have atrophy. They cannot do a balancing act, and they cannot handle their own skeleton. And also within autistic symptoms, they may have oversensitive hearing, and also they may have tactile problems. And also some of them with SPLD may have difficulty in coordinating their eyes and their hands, and they may write mirror images of words, and then that would bring about a lot of emotional problems. They are mistaken to be not paying attention, that their parents have not taught them to behave well. If they do not get the right kind of support, their growing up would be very much affected. In European and the American countries, as early as the early 70s, there was already school-based special education. At the level of kindergartens, in primary and secondary schools, there will be school-based occupational therapy. The purpose of such service is very good. We will attend to the needs of these students, so they will be confirmed as to what kind of disorder they suffer from, and also there will be preventive work to help with their developmental disorders. There will also be talks for parents and teachers. There will be workshops to let them know that the students may have muscular disorders, and also there will be training and other kinds of counseling for students to train their attention span. There are also occupational therapists in schools to do assessment and treatment, and there will also be individual or small group training. Parents can observe classes. We can see very good results coming out of this, and students do not have to travel far to different clinics and hospitals, and they actually get very appropriate service. There will also be assistance during day classes. Occupational therapists would actually go to classes to do student counseling. Maybe they will help with examination arrangements, and also they may make accommodation arrangements by reducing the workload in terms of homework. So I think we should legislate to stipulate that all confirmed SEN cases must have IEP personal support and assistance. Thank you, Ms. Chung. Next, Ms. Mok Wai Ha. Thank you. We are an association, and on the 10th of April last year, we wrote to the LegCo to complain against the Hong Kong EAA, and also on the 15th of January this year, we also wrote to LegCo to complain against the Education Bureau and also the Hong Kong EAA. This is because we believe that these two bodies have not done anything to help SEN students. I will concentrate on primary schools. In December last year and also January this year, we have conducted a survey on dyslexia students. We have found that 40% of parents have said that early intervention and identification in Hong Kong cannot help our children because our children have not been identified. If I could go to the paper, it is said in paragraph 41, that they were able to discover 10,859 students in 2011-2012. And it is said that in 2012-13, the number went up to 17,440. But then I believe the actual percentage was only 2%, but the international level is for 10%. Therefore, the survey results have said that 40% of the parents think that their children have not been identified. Secondly, the waiting time is too long. According to the 28th of March 2012 paper from EDB to the LegCo, it is said that if it is a serious case, they said that 80% would be assessed within 2 months. And also 90% would be given assessment within 5 months. However, according to our survey reports, if it is an average case, over half would have to wait 6 to 12 months and over 20% have to wait a year before they get assessment. Many schools do not have formal assessment and they would not give you help without formal assessment. What is going to happen to students while waiting? Also, the accommodation arrangements are not effective. 40% of the parents think that after assessment, they believe that the school's assistance is unrealistic and it is just a kind of cosmetic assistance. If we say teachers do not know, teachers cannot teach our children, then how can there be good accommodation arrangements? Again, paras 26 and 27 of the paper, it is said that 25% of students have received 30 hours of training, and also every school would have one teacher attending thematic courses. Is that enough? And also 74% of the parents have said that after assessment, there has been no meeting with schools to do review. And then para 33 of the paper from the Bureau. Can you please finish off? Para 33 of the paper, homeschool cooperation, and also the parent guide on WSA to IE. It is said that parents know about this paper, but in fact, even parents and most teachers have not seen the paper. Thank you very much, Ms. Mock. Then from the same association, a representative from primary school parents, Mr. Tang Chi-kong. Good afternoon. My school and also my son have been proved to have dyslexia, but they were not tested to be at primary 1. That shows that the test is problematic. There was no assessment report, no follow-up meeting, no follow-up record. My son was in primary 3 and the TSA result was that, and also for Chinese dictation and also the workload from homework, my son was always saying that he was dying. He just did not have time to do dyslexia training. SPLD does not exhibit any symptoms. Some teachers will say this is not fair to other parents, and so they avoided the problem. Of course, some parents do not think that SPLD exists. If you visit the website of EDB, you may not be able to access too many things. I usually go to Taiwan websites for information. A child with SPLD may suffer from one or more learning disorder, but the DOH and also the other departments only do difficulty in learning and writing, and I patronized a private organization to help my son. As for teaching assistants, they use outsourced services, and the quality of the service varies. The hours of teaching are not continuous, and they send different people at different times. There is not one teacher with good training. My son's disability report has been done over a year ago. It is very useful. I do not know how to communicate with the school. I hope the Bureau will arrange for at least 2 parent-teacher meetings. I know there is a lack of educational psychologists. It is not good not to have their participation. I hope every quarterly you should upload on your website how we can seek information on your latest policies. And I'd like to ask this question. Doesn't it mean that in IE every child should be treated the same, that they should be subject to the same teaching method and the same assessment, and that you call fairness? Thank you, Mr. Tang. Then from the same association, from the secondary school part, Ms. Song Yut-ling. Good afternoon. I represent the secondary school concern group, I like to talk about 3 points. Number one, under the NSS, students with SPLD do not receive fair education. They are assessed on Chinese, English, mathematics, and also liberal studies. This is even more difficult for students with SPLD. Language subjects are already where they are weak. And liberal studies is to help students think and expand their knowledge. But under the present examination system, the exams are to be written. And it is so difficult for students with SPLD. And of course, liberal studies is one compulsory subject to enter universities. When students pick subjects for senior secondary, schools would look at their examination results in approving the subjects they choose. And students with SPLD just cannot choose the subjects they are interested in and where they are good at. I can give 2 examples. One, student Ho in primary 3. He had to repeat it already, and in primary 5, the school told the parent that he should withdraw. In the end, his mother was looking for assessment for him, and in the end, he was found to have SPLD. And his mother discovered that he was strong in visual arts, and in the secondary level, he got a school that was suited to him, but he had to move from Hong Kong Island to Tuen Mun so that he could go to that school. And student Ho was well trained at the school, so he could expound his interest. And in the visual arts subject, he got an award, and there will be a big exhibition from the 2nd to the 4th of May. Second case, my own daughter. She has SPLD. She is now in S5. She has been to 3 primary schools because we could not find a school with knowledge on SPLD and assistance for SPLD. So she was deprived, and actually she was very much interested in drawing and arts. When she was in secondary school, there was no room for her development either. In S3, she came first of the entire form in arts education or in visual arts. But exam results-wise, she was not one of the first 40, so she could not choose that subject for senior secondary. Number 3, in the applied learning studies subject. Please finish off. Yes. When students apply to do that subject, it is not a student-oriented subject. The mechanism for application is such that the school will propose courses for students, and these are taken within the school, but they are not formulated according to students' interest. Since students cannot apply independently, well, last year there were 35 new courses operated by the Bureau, and there were vacancies. It was just that students were not able to apply to read those. Thank you, Ms. Sung. From the same association, Tertiary Institute Concern Group, Ms. Yip Leung Ching. Thank you, Chairman. Between 2011-2012, only 200 students applied for IV courses. This is because they were put in another line. And those who went to universities, well, in para 5 of your paper, there were only 14 who went into university. And I don't know whether you have included overseas students. Now I will talk about the lack of assistance in IV courses. Right now, you only have extra hours, not anything else. When students cannot catch up, and if they have other problems, students do not know who they should turn to. They will contact the teachers, who will not contact them on their own initiative. They can only ask questions, but they do not receive other kinds of assistance. There is also a lack of communication. The head of subject and the students' service, maybe they are not talking, and the students do not know who to turn to for help.
So then when there are problems, they try to find a teacher to discuss it. But because they want to graduate, now this particular social worker could not help, even though the subject teacher gave the student an opportunity. But under this system, the student could not take the exam. Now the student wrote 3 different letters and hoped that the subject head teacher can allow him or her to take it, because it is the last year of school. But then it was not approved until their parents wrote a letter to the head of the department, and so they could get special treatment. Now so we think that the relevant department should actually talk with the head of the department and help the students so they can have appropriate help. In Ivy, there's also not enough support system. There are not enough resources to help the students to complete their courses. After the school examinations were over, students can appeal their grades if they're not happy with them. But when then the students can only look at their own scripts and cannot find the exam questions, and they don't know what the standards for grading are. So if this particular student wants to know what they did wrong and so want to improve their grade, they really don't have enough information to do so. Now, the SPLD students also need clear guidelines to help them. But in this system, they cannot know what their problems are. Okay, thank you, Ms. Yip. Next is representative from the same association, from the University Concern Group, Ms. Lee Menying. Thank you. Thank you, Chairman. Thank you, all the members. All the parents here, we all care very much about our children. No matter of what the situation is, parents want their children can grow up happily. But it seems that that cannot happen. I want to say some points. In terms of university students who has FPLD, they have some differences in terms of SEN students. They are not physically disabled, but there are only 14 students who can go to university. But if 10% of these students, then there should be around 10,000 or so, and then if there should be around 1,000 or so students in university with these learning difficulties. So we do learning. It seems that there is a lot of prisoners who have learning difficulties. So is this because our mismatch of resource allocation and unfair allocation? Why is it that there is no 10% of students with learning difficulties, but there are 40% of people with learning difficulties in prisons? Is it a waste of our resources? The government puts a lot of resources into education, but what are the problems in IE so that these students can get the help they need? So what we're thinking right now is that IE has wasted so much money on each particular student. But is there a guideline to show that from whether or not these resources can help these students? Is there a guideline that we can show the parents or teachers or the whole society to see that these students can improve themselves, not necessarily on schooling, but it can be their emotional control or finding a job and living skills. So there's something that we have omitted, and it's very important. In the new educational system, it's really not fair to students with SLD. They cannot even, they have difficulties or problems, but now they have to have exams with liberal studies and English and Chinese. So in this situation, how can they go to university? Is the threshold for university too high? I would like to ask, of students in university and all sectors of education, how can we treat them humanely? I have two children who are studying in university in Taiwan. In Taiwan, they only need to tell the teachers that they have these difficulties. Then they'll have an humane and fair treatment. They don't have to beg for anything. Then Hong Kong's universities, how can we achieve this? Thank you, Chairman. Thank you, Ms. Lee. Next is the same association chairperson, Ms. Keung Wai-lin. Thank you, Chairman, and thank you all the officials and members. So we heard some representatives talking about the needs of students from different sectors, different levels of education. Right now, Hong Kong is already falling behind Europe or USA, Singapore, and Taiwan. Why is it in the past more than 10 years or more? So even though we meet with the EDB so many times, and we always talk about what we see in terms of the monitoring systems problems or some problems of the guidelines, and the EDB has responded in this document today. But we feel that it said that the current resources it's been allotted, but are they really effective? We find that it's not really that effective. It cannot help the problems of the students. So why is it we should write a letter to complain to the LegCo? But we've waited for 1 year. So regardless of examination authority or the other bodies, they hear us. But whenever we see the officials year after year and we say the same thing over and over again, is it really not fair? Because it seems we don't see any changes. Last year, we complained the examination authority do not respect us and ignore our needs. Because we say this because during the meetings, some of the representatives who come, such as a person who is not Chinese, and so we have to speak English. But not all of us parents can present all of their needs in English. So a lot of officials tell us that, we're sorry, if you don't speak English, then the official will leave. And so we still have to use English to talk about a point. So in this policy, is it really not fair to us parents of SLD students? So because we have to speak in English because we have to accommodate this official. So with so many problems, before Easter of this year, we met with Mr. Leung Yiu-chung. We went to Taiwan with him. We hope that we can find different ways out in a neighboring country. So in the documents of 21 and 22 of the EDB, it seems that the examination authority is really reviewing what we've said in terms of using a special software for exams. But the rest of official told us that this is really not the issue of the examination authority and the EDB's problem. But today, and then the EDB says that there will be a meeting for a task force. But during that day, we saw a lot of different officials. We see that they just shift the burdens of responsibility. On that day also, they say that there are a lot of communication problems and errors. So we hope that the officials can review this issue. But the officials say that, we suggest 3 points. We hope that there will be a special network for information, and to hope to have a full-time support personnel. And so there will be legislative protection so that the students can have, within the current education system, to have a special position. And then there should be a special group to look at our problems. And there's also a document in the website. I don't think anyone can read something that's so long, but we have contrasted Hong Kong with Taiwan's contrast. And this is a PowerPoint on a web point. And it addresses the teachers, the training, resources, monitoring, and other areas. And we hope that you can go to our website. Thank you. Thank you, Ms. Keung. So we have received very detailed documents, and we do see your comparisons with Hong Kong and Taiwan, and it's been very well done. And we really welcome that if you have other documents, you can give them to us after the meeting. Next is Ms. Ice Chan Sut Lai. Thank you. Hello. I am a mother of 3 children. My second child is a boy. He's 7. He's living he's taking school in a mainstream primary school. So he has been diagnosed as ADHD and OD students, and it's a serious level. Of course, I feel very sad when hearing the news. In the past 6 months, and I've faced a lot of difficulties, and I hope that everyone understands, especially the officials. The only thing I can do is to write this letter to queue up for the hospital services. But it seems that I can only see a psychiatrist after 1 year. I don't know how to face the days ahead of me. At the same time, I also gave this assessment report to the school. This is a government primary school. But the primary school did not take any activity until November of last year. My son made a lot of nuisance to other students, and there were a lot of complaints from teachers. And indecent and appropriate actions were penalized by the teachers. Now, all of the students in his class think he's the worst kid, and I'm very afraid if I cannot deal with the problem, he will face a lot of obstacles and unhappiness when he's growing up. So I'm afraid that he will grow up and harm society, and will harm himself and others, or my family, and will cause difficulties between me and my husband. So, of course, we have to, sometimes if we punish him, then that will cause a lot of negative emotions. And then my child may have to use the same to his children because of all these difficulties. And it's so serious that I told him, also he caused physical wounds to students. So we're very worried that why is it that the school has not done anything? So I personally went to find a social worker in the school. And then this, from what you can see, is that even if there's an assessment report, the school does not take any action to help my son. So I feel very helpless. In the beginning of January, when the school was organizing an educational psychologist to discuss my son's issues with me, the conclusion is that my son may not have ADHD, but he may be autistic because he doesn't know how to care about others' feelings. So I feel very helpless at that point as well. 2 days later, the EP told us that you have to talk with the psychiatrist to get a letter or certification, and then only then can you get resources. Why is it that no one told me and no one taught us that you need to have this doctor certificate to have resources? So when I went to the hospital recently, they gave me a number, is that I can have a faster line to see a pediatrician. And February 14th, the first time we saw a doctor, the doctor told us to have an observation program. And during this observation, I feel that my son is very serious problem with ADHD, social problems, and reading and writing difficulty. During this time, he did not have any help from professional help. So me and my husband can only just borrow some books and to learn about him. But a lot of times, theory is not easily applied to our situation. So my father and I feel that it's a very heavy burden to teach our son. So we can. But I think he's used to our penalties, and then he retaliates against us. So that there's got a lot of family strife because of this. So even his younger brother has used a lot of physical violence to treat other people. So I'm also afraid that my other children will be affected by this. Ms. Shan, I'm sorry, the time is up.
We have got your submission that you wrote, actually, in your handwriting. We were very moved. We understand your suffering. We also know that even with the hospital training group at the hospital. He has to wait till the 19th of July 2016, but we think it is impossible for him to have to wait so long. Later on, we'll ask the HA and also the Bureau to respond, okay? Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chang. Ms. Bernice Leung. Good afternoon, Chairman, members. Last week, at the ADHD parent seminar, I met a mother with 3 children. The first son has been confirmed. The second son, the mother doesn't want to admit that he is, but he apparently is. And the third child is too small for identification. And by seeing her, it reminds me of a few years ago. I could see that the mother was in a very tense mood. She did not know who to turn to for help. ADHD does not only affect the daily functions or behavior and also the emotions of the child. In fact, the entire family can be affected. How he gets along with his siblings and also the parents, and also how the 2 parents discuss his problem. And other children also feel that parents devote too much attention and time on the child with ADHD. And these children would feel that they are neglected. And of course, the ADHD child will also have an impact on the siblings. With regard to support for the family, there is very little indeed from the administration. For example, parent training course, there is no continuity. You have it in primary school but not secondary school. And it is not a kind of standard treatment program. In other words, when parents see the doctor, they have to ask and wait in line. That was my experience. And then you had to wait at least 9 months. What happens during the interim? We know medication helps, but treatment for the child and also training for the parent are equally important. In our association, whenever there is a parent training course, it's always oversubscribed. In terms of family counseling, there is none. My own experience is that I felt that I had a problem in the family, so I fork out the money and I looked for family counseling. What if the parents do not have that kind of financial ability? Do you want to wait till there is violence in the family? I know a child who has repeated S1 for 3 years. He is not talking to the parent, and they would quarrel on the second day of a trip outside Hong Kong. Do you want to wait for that to happen before we provide family counseling to families? If there is better support during the primary stage, then there won't be so many problems at secondary stage. Thank you. Next, Mr. Joseph Lau. Chairman, members. I'm a practicing clinical psychologist. I have been treating ADHD children and young people for over 20 years. This is my experience. ADHD is a chronic illness. It doesn't only affect the academic studies and also social activities, etc. of the children. 60% of the patients have symptoms going on till the adult stage. So it could be a short disorder or it can have long-term effects. To the patient, of course, there are numerous problems. As the parents have said, there are social problems. They have low self-esteem. They drop out of school. They cannot get a job. They are prone to accidents and injuries, and they can also abuse drugs. Our clinical experience tells us that we have to deal with different disorders. As you know, 40 to 50% also are affected by confrontational disorders, and many have dyslexia, and many have anxiety and also depression. They do not have enough attention span, they do not have behavioral inhibition, and they can cause traffic accidents because they do not drive well, and therefore the price is really high. Some young people drop out of school and they do not perform well at work, so they lose their job, so they become antisocial and they become crime offenders. Right now, the rate for young people and children to be really sick is 4 to 6%. If there is no early assistance, you are actually wasting the manpower resources of our next generation, and society has to also shoulder long-term economic prices. Because of time constraint, I will talk about support for parents. For ADHD children, parents are great help in their treatment. If after confirmation, parents do not get information about ADHD and understand the different treatment methods, they will not benefit their children. They may have worries about drugs, and so they do not give the medication to children, and they may not allow their children to undergo training. Some studies have shown that parents of ADHD children have more arguments between themselves. They may go for negative supervision skills, and so they are under extreme pressure. Sometimes they may suffer from anxiety disorder and also depression themselves. We must also understand that there is a heredity problem. Some parents themselves also have ADHD. In terms of emotional support for parents, which is parent training, there is a lot of deficiency and it has to be improved. Thank you, Mr. Lau. Next, Mr. Lo Tak-keung. Chairman, members, good afternoon. I am a parent of an ADHD child. In 2005, I took my child to the doctor and he had to wait 10 months or 9 months in order to be assessed by the Child Assessment Service, and then he had to wait 18 months to see a child psychiatrist. So altogether 2 years and 3 months. As was said, we should have early identification and assessment, but the child had to wait 2 years and more. In 2007, he was confirmed as having ADHD and it was regarded as a disability, so there were more resources. But as Dr. Leung said, they had to wait 80 weeks. I can let you know that in NT East at Nethersole Hospital, new cases are seen only in January 2015. In other words, I have already submitted my application and the date given was the 2nd of January 2005. But the most serious cases may have that shortened by a bit. And the children who can become sick would be between 5 to 9%. And the DOH said that there are 14,000, but for Education Bureau, there are just 4,000 students. Only 1/3 where have the remaining 2/3 gone. Many have been confirmed, but they are hidden from the public eye. And many parents have to wait over 2 years for the service. Early treatment has advantages, but even now we have to wait so long. Why is that so? Medication is not the most important. Medication is not going to solve all the problems, but you do need medication. My child had to wait 18 months. At P3, I told my child, study hard for the exam. And he said, why do I have to revise my work? Because I won't get a pass anyway. I was so saddened. After confirmation of the case, he got medication, and then in P6, I said, did things improve? He said, well, I can choose when to listen to the teacher. So at least he was helped. But we had to wait so long. Now at the HA, medication is given, and the medication can have short-term or long-term effect. Short-term medication can be good for 2-3 hours, and long-term medication can be good for 12 hours. Sometimes he skips a time of for medication, and I said, why did you skip? And he said, Daddy, if I would remember when to take medication, I won't need the medication. There is a drug formulary at the HA, but recently we saw the doctor and we had to pay for the medication at $20 to $30 a pill. It is quite a big burden on us. I hope you should allow more medication to be given free, and there should be more doctors so the waiting time is shortened. Thank you, Mr. Low. I am hearing a lot of pain. Miss Shirley Hui. Thank you, Chairman. I have an ADHD child. I'd like to speak on behalf of these students and their parents, that these are students with SPLD and ADHD. We'd like to say that we are very agitated, we feel helpless, and we are very saddened. We have a simple hope as parents. We hope our child would not be a failure in the present education system, that they can catch up with others. But unfortunately, our children are always very good in their IQ, but they do not have encouragement, they do not have the incentive, and they do not perform well in school, so they have low self-esteem. Other people think that they are so naughty and that they are troublemakers, and sometimes they have to go to international schools or schools with a lower standard, and sometimes they have to have a boarding school overseas. But medically, it has been proven that the ADHD is actually a congenital brain problem. By having the case confirmed, by having medication, counseling, and also pressure handling, and also adjusting the diet, and also teaching, etc., a series of long-term structured supervision, these children can be great contributors to society. We have seen many such examples. So it is not the taking of just one pill or a tablet for the treatment of ADHD. I like to say it is like there is a fire in the building, and those who can run away from the fire and not be burned dead. Those who are not able are stuck in the building. This IE is only a gridlock. It is not that the two children are placed side by side and you call that IE. You are wasting the youth of these children. The government is not taking the lead to, in fact, do a serious assessment. So you come to grips with the actual number. You do not have a total and overall plan. You do not do the right publicity so society understands the needs of these children. Principals, teachers are not trained. There is a lack of psychologists and other experts. Parents are crying out loud for help. And teachers are also crying out loud because they don't know how to handle these students in school. They're also under pressure. So this is not an individual problem for the student or the parent or for the school. It is a serious social problem. The administration should really face up to it. You should actively study into effective policies to be implemented interdepartmentally. If there is unfairness, the EOC should step in. I will appeal to officials. First of all, don't be ignorant, don't be careless, don't be complacent, and parents and teachers and children should be brave in standing up for themselves, because we are all equal before the law. And also other people, please care about these students and parents around you. There must be one of these people at your side. Thank you very much, Ms. Hui. Next, Ms. Winnie Chan. Good afternoon, parents, chairman, and officials. I have a son with ADHD and a girl with SPLD. One on the admission level for universities, and two support. I hope not just the IV and not just the VTC. There should be adjustment to the entry requirements for students with ADHD. There must be at least one place in each discipline for ADHD and SPLD students. Hopefully, the tertiary students should have a special admission scheme, so these children also get a place. And at university, there should be support service, including counseling and also learning support, and maybe exemption of certain subjects. For ADHD people, they face risks in their youth. A young person was able to read civil engineering, but he had to spend 6 years on a 3-year course. He almost failed to complete the course, and then he saw a doctor. Then he was confirmed to have ADHD, and he was treated so he could graduate.
You also hear a lot of parents that when they have children with ADHD, then they face a lot of pressure that's higher than other families. Because there's a heredity percentage of 70%, then a lot of times these parents will feel emotional problems and will be depressed. For me personally, for 10 years ago, I was diagnosed with depression, and I saw doctors at the government clinics, and I was being treated, and I was very fortunate, and I recovered. Now I was discussing with the doctors about ADHD. They asked them, do you still feel suicidal, or can you handle work? And then there's no problem. But they don't really know how to diagnose an adult with ADHD until I went to a private psychiatrist and was diagnosed and then received the therapy. I hope that the administration can provide enough support to parents in terms of emotional support as well as family counseling. In terms of preventative work, it will be much better than rescue efforts. For example, if you have heart problems, then you try to prevent yourself from having heart attack. When talking about ADHD, it's a problem in the brain. So why can't you do some preventative work? I hope that the HA or the SWD can provide extra support. Ms. Chen, are you finished? Yes. Okay, thank you. Next, Ms. Wong Hung Lin of Education Employees General Union. Thank you, Chairman. In terms of the whole school system of integrated education, we feel that there's a lot of suggestions from teachers about the implementation of this. How can we integrate two very different school programs? It is completely different. The IE is very different from mainstream schools. Mainstream schools really require the teachers to teach the required courses in a very limited time. For example, one is very fast and there's a lot of courses. It's like a rabbit. But the other type of school program is like it's like a tortoise. How do we integrate this? Especially in the new higher secondary school courses, there's not enough time already. If we have to do individual small adjustments between different students, how can we help a completely different type of school program? Open universities' pressure is very high, and it really affects how mainstream school students can go into universities. And their parents have showed that they have a concern. They are afraid that SEN students can cause the disruption in the class, so that to lower the overall quality. And the parents' concerns should be addressed. If there is a specialist doctor on this, and let's say he's facing 30 different SEN students with different needs. If one or two SEN students need immediate intervention, then they must stop the course. Even if let's say there's a doctor with specialist training, they cannot handle the pressure from Open University. So we can see that even the teachers, they have comprehensive training. They cannot wholly solve the realities of the Hong Kong educational system. The core problem is that the mainstream schools programs, in terms of IE, is completely different. We must either delete some of the requirements of mainstream schools, or have of special schools for these students with special needs, so that they can fully develop their talents, so that those students, those SEN students who can handle the course load of mainstream schools, can stay in them. And then they can happily learn. So why should we forcefully have IE and to waste resources. So how does LDB handle this? Do they have a long-term plan? Thank you. Thank you, Ms. Wong. Next is Ms. Naiho. Hello, everyone. I am a parent of an SEN student and a representative of this. And I want to talk about what happens after they're done school. Our students have to face the suffering of local schools, and they don't have the rights to receive a university education. So I hope that they can have the opportunity to have a university education. There are not enough supports for universities for SEN students. Okay, so our children are already of age to go to university. But of course, there are not enough opportunities in Hong Kong. Even for Ivy, it's very difficult for these students to take the studies that they want. So at this time, we heard that Taiwan universities have extra spaces, and they're willing and also have experience to teach the students of Hong Kong with SEN. So our children can go to university in Taiwan to study. And furthermore, Taiwan has the relevant legislation and support to help these students. So we are very happy about this. And so very fortunately, 5 students applied and they were all accepted. And all the parents are very happy about this. So when we are preparing to undertake this, some of the parents do not have the necessary financial means, and they cannot pay the school tuition. And because they don't have the financial support, a lot of parents couldn't send their children there. Even though the universities take us, the students cannot go to universities there. So we hope that the electrical members can support that to let these students have the necessary financial support so they can receive scholarships and help from various school lending programs. So with these students do hope to come back to Hong Kong and help the society here. The SEN students need special support, and Hong Kong does not have this. Taiwan does have this. And the expenses of Hong Kong is similar to that of Taiwan. And also they teach in Mandarin. So it's easier for SEN students to adjust to it. And it's also more convenient for parents to visit them. Overall, the spending of universities in Taiwan is much cheaper than other foreign universities. So we hope that the government can support us. Of course, for overall Hong Kong society, if the SEN students can go to Taiwan and finish a university and come back to support Hong Kong society, that would be a good thing. Otherwise, they may end up being the burdens of society, and we hope that they can be producers and not burdens. Thank you, Ms. Ng. Next, we would like to ask Ms. Iris Wong Ping Fan, member of the Young DAB. Thank you. I'm from the Young DAB. Today, we're talking about integrated education, and it's been launched for 20 years, but the effectiveness has also always been come into question. A lot of the parents, schools, and teachers today do feel a lot of difficulties and pressures. We really understand that all the parents want the children to achieve well, but when there are problems in terms of their learning, a lot of parents are afraid that they cannot follow with the school work, and there's a lot of concerns with parents. We find that in terms of there are a lot of different areas where they may face difficulties, and it may be about optical vision, emotional language, or physical problems. So we think that the current IE, does it really help these students with different difficulties? Furthermore, we don't think that right now students with learning difficulties don't have enough support, and a lot of parents just now or school representatives have already mentioned this. The DAB is concerned that in terms of there's not enough extra resources in kindergarten to diagnose students with problems. And of course, in kindergarten, it's parents and kindergarten teachers who help these students, and the government does not have any supports, and then so it may not have enough support for these children later. In 2009, the DAB has released this particular document in terms of what I've just said now, and we've already asked some university scholars to work on this, and it points out that 70% of kindergarten teachers think that there are at least two ADHD students. So we can extrapolate that there's a 5% of children in Hong Kong that may have a learning difficulty. And scholars point out that in 2010, the government has responded that in their assessment, they think that there's around 8,900 students in kindergarten with these problems. But scholars have pointed out that this is completely dissociated from reality. We know that EDB is kind of slow. It may be because that there's no comprehensive system to diagnose these children. Because the various plans is not comprehensively included children with the different types of learning disabilities. So we think that we should diagnose as early as possible these children. We think that currently the policy has some deficiencies. We think that we should review the current diagnosis services and to shorten the queuing time. And there must be a professional support service, such as for primary schools. They should implement the same system in kindergartens. Third, we must increase the training of kindergarten teachers. So we hope that the administration can do this and provide more support for this, and help them diagnose the children. And we also hope that in terms of setting up a system for these children to go from kindergarten to primary, etc., all the way up to the higher levels of education. And so we hope that there will be a comprehensive record for this, so they can face less difficulties in terms of advancing to different levels. And we hope that we can increase the support and knowledge provided to parents. And we all sit here today, and we hope that the children with the learning difficulties can be treated fairly. I hope that the administration can take the lead on this and do more long-term follow-up activities and to diagnose children as early as possible, and to sincerely review this, and so students can get the appropriate education. Thank you. Next is Miss Maggie Man-Young. Hi, everyone. My son has a reading and writing disability, as well as a language disability, coordination problems, and others. So a lot of times, different children do face a similar problem. He is now in S2. What I see now is that in the EDB's documents, there are a lot of different guidelines, arrangements, and there are a lot of reminders to school. I feel this is very foreign. It would be good if they can have all of these things, but this is very foreign to me. It seems like it's actually happening in another country. My personal experience is that when he was in primary 2, he had to wait 2 years before he was diagnosed. Of course, the EDB is saying that we've improved so much because this has happened 7 or 8 years ago. But let's talk about when he was he's in a secondary school. I see that page 3 of the document, it says that there is a follow-up in the secondary schools in different years, and in fact, it may affect the open examinations. So I feel kind of concerned about this. I went to the clinical psychologist recently, and my husband asked a doctor in terms of a follow-up medical concerns. But then this doctor says, I don't know. So will it be that if my son has to go to HKEAA special arrangements, but then they ask me, oh, has your son had a follow-up medical services? But then he never had any, so I feel very concerned about this.
Also, it is said that there are accommodation arrangements. I remember in primary there was some accommodation arrangement for his dictation, but there is no dictation in the secondary class, and there were only extra time and larger print for exam papers, etc. And in the end, my child had to give up accommodation arrangements because they were not useful for him. They were not tailor-made for him. There were no expert proposals to help him. After reading the papers, I only feel that why is it that these have not been implemented? Is it that there is a problem with supervision? Or is it just that schools are not doing well? Just now the teacher said that this might not just have to do with schools. Have we plowed in the right resources so that there is enough support to teachers and schools? Recently I was in Taiwan together with other parents, and I could see that they were not as wealthy as our administration, and they were not plowing in as much resources, but then they were the right kind of assistance, and the money was well spent. So you can see that the students there had enough support and they were helped. Thank you. Ms. Ho Shuk-yi. Thank you. I wanted to talk about early identification and whole person development for children, but before that I'd like to respond to the teacher who spoke. I think it is very sad that the EDB resources and classes and also exams make teachers feel that our children should not be in mainstream schools, that they should be relegated to special schools because the public exam results would be affected. I'm so disappointed I had to respond. Now coming back to my speech, I was going to talk about holistic development for children. Mr. Kevin Young, the Undersecretary, was very good. He mentioned that service at the beginning of his remarks. He said that this would be the crux of the IE service. It is a very well mapped out service, that it is going to be interdepartmental. I think that is something good. And if it is so good, let us look at the figures. Last year, at the WS panel, there was a paper for a certain meeting. It is mentioned that pre-primary institutes would refer children to this service. There were only 1,800, and out of those, only 1,100 could go to the CAS for assessment. Many parents have said that the figures are low. I'm talking about students diagnosed to have ADHD and SPLD. And through this so-called well-established mechanism, only such a small number has been diagnosed. Why is that so? We have heard parents say that they might see that their children are in this category, and they were asking the MCHC to refer the children for assessment. But the MCHC sometimes might insist that it is not necessary, and the parents have to go to a pediatrician, and so the pediatrician and for the assessment. So we were suspecting, is it that MCHC staff cannot do the identification themselves, that they are unable, or are they suppressing the service demand? Because after all, the waiting time is already long enough. If the figure is not totally reviewed, also I'd like to say that the paper last year was issued by the LWB, but this year we have the EDB. However, the MCHC belongs to the FHB. So from which bureau should we have the resources? If we ask for a comprehensive review, which bureau should play the lead? Since we have too many bureaus looking after this, there have been barriers in policy implementation. We know the service should exist, but different bureaus and departments are holding up the service, either intentionally or not intentionally. I hope this can be explained. Thank you. Ms. Lee Kit-yi. Chairman, my child is in P3. At P2, in the second half of the year, he was assessed to have dyslexia and also weak muscles. I took the assessment back to the school. Without any support, the school only did accommodation for Chinese language test and exam, that there would be the reading out of the paper and also extra time. But for mathematics, English, liberal studies, etc., and also religious studies, there was no accommodation arrangement made. And in the next scholastic term, I talked to the school for the relevant arrangements, but we were only told that that would be the arrangement and that's it. When he was in P3, I got the full report. Again, I submitted it to the school. And the relevant teacher said this report was more or less the same, but I could allow the English subject to have answers dictated and also there would be extra time, but nothing else. And in fact, the liberal studies subject would be in English. And the explanation was, since this is a report in Chinese and it concentrated on the Chinese characters, so there shouldn't be any accommodation arrangement for anything in English. In the first term of P3, during a mathematics exam, he got a very low mark, and I talked to the educational psychologist of the school, and he referred my case to the course leader. After some questioning, he told me that in the coming term, my child could have accommodation arrangement also for mathematics. In other words, there would be arrangement for Chinese, English, and mathematics, that there would be the dictating of answers and also extra time, but no extra arrangement for liberal studies. I was at a loss, so I talked to the EDB about the lack of accommodation arrangement, but I was only told that I would have to take it up with the school. In other words, they could not help me. But the school just did not act according to the guide on examination to help my SEN child with accommodation arrangements. And also, about school transfer, it was not a pleasant experience either. Once the school knows my child had learning difficulties, they were reluctant to take him on. They would say the homework burden is very heavy and the school-based curriculum is not suited to your child, etc. And my conclusion is that I hope that all teachers and head teachers would act according to the guide of the EDB on special education to make special accommodation arrangement for SEN students. Thank you. Next, Ms. Choi Yip-Pyu. Good afternoon, Chairman. I have a daughter who has SPLD. She's 10 years old. I'd like to tell you the experience of my daughter to show that there is a lack of supervision from the EDB on the implementation of IE. From 2010 to 2011, when my daughter was in P1, in the second term, he was found to have SPLD, and in the first term of P2, accommodation arrangements were made for her. But as to, in fact, my daughter's treatment is already much better than what other parents have seen, but then they have not been effective for my daughter either. Say, for example, she would be so anxious that she would be biting her teeth during her sleep if she knows that there is an English test the next day. And if I do the revision with her, she would be crying so much her tears would drop on her lap. Because the school has high expectations on the test results of students. And by the second year, my daughter's self-esteem was almost inexistent. So I left my job. I would like to rebuild the self-esteem of my daughter, because I believe self-esteem means everything to a person's growing up. And I was training her with effective methods to learn. And then I think that it's fortunate that my child does very well. From just 3 marks in the English exam, they also count your daily work. Now she has 71. This is just within the year. And from 15 marks in Chinese up to now 80 odd marks. And the average mark for all the subjects is 71 marks. So I'm so happy. I'm so happy with the results. But then in June, the headmaster said that out of the 5 papers in Chinese, there is 1 paper that my child is 1 mark short, and she has to take the extra exam, and that would be at the end of August. If she can get a pass, she will be promoted. If not, she will have to repeat the class. And I saw that in that exam, the accommodation arrangements were stopped for my daughter, and I asked why, and they said between the first term and the second term, we saw a lot of improvement with the daughter, and without informing me, without discussing with me, the accommodation arrangements were stopped. I think that is hugely unfair, and I tried to talk to the counseling officer of the special education unit who got into contact with the school. And then still the school refused to have arrangement accommodation for the extra exam, and the counseling officer said there is nothing they could do. My daughter got the resources, but the resources were for the other low performers in the school. They were not for my daughter, and the officer still said that they could not do anything with the school. I want to propose that there should be more supervision on schools in the implementation of IE. And the schools should not be allowed to stop accommodation arrangements arbitrarily. And the money should not be spent on other issues and aspects. Thank you, Mr. Choi. I think your experience is also very painful. We would ask the Bureau to really answer you. Next, Ms. Choi Shit-chan. Chairman, members, good afternoon. I'm a parent. My son is in P6. He has autistic lack of attention and also ADHD. He also has SPLD. IE is a torture for me and my son. 3 minutes is not enough. I hope you will tolerate me, and I will have to complete this sheet. It is a children's story. In terms of IE, my son was forced to be a guinea pig. When he was in the first primary school, the teacher had undergone training for tackling these students, but then he or she did not benefit from the courses. He said that my son was lazy. He was subject to penalties. And in the end, my son lost control. And he said, "Do you want to force me to commit suicide?" And in fact, it was not just my son. I also felt cornered. 5 years ago, I was interviewed by a newspaper. They reported that because of despair and lack of help, my depression symptoms worsened. And I swallowed 100 pills. I tried to swallow this packet of medicine to commit suicide. I am keeping the medication to remind myself of this. I know why I killed off the idea of committing suicide. And I thought nobody was helping my son. If I would leave this world, my son would even be in a more miserable position. So I decided not to take these 100 pills. And I told myself if I did not swallow the medication, I would go on, no matter how difficult it is. Even if the government or the school did not support me, I would find ways to save myself. In the second term of P2, my son was compelled so much. He had symptoms of anxiety. I had no choice. I had to transfer to a school to repeat P2 in a school where South Asians were educated, because I had to find a school place to anchor my son. But tragically, 5 years later, IE has not been improved. In another school, every year I still had to explain the learning problems with the teachers. I had to accept window dressing accommodation arrangements. And I know the school also wanted to take away that kind of arrangement in the name of fairness. And in my despair, I went to a social worker for help. And a very well-meaning social worker got my son to be assessed by EDB again. And in the end, my son was confirmed to have medium-level SPLD. And the social worker said, "Why is it that nobody opened IEP for my child?" He said that the principle for accommodation is such that if the child has the need, we should not remove the accommodation arrangement just because of a public exam. It will be unfair. And the social worker thought that my son should have IEP, that there should be the dictation of answers and also scribing. But then the school refused, and I had to go to a doctor, I had to go to an advisory inspector, and then they had a follow-up meeting. I had to face 10 such people alone, and the school then allowed me to have what I should get. In the end, I had depression coming back to me, and my son did not improve.
And my son was always bullied verbally, saying that he's worthless and he's garbage. I know that they're representatives from EDB. I would like to ask them, so they have taken so many resources to write these guidelines, i.e., or the various arrangements that these students need. Do you have any policies to make these schools follow these guidelines? If you don't, what is the point of writing these guidelines? If the schools are not following them, this is all just garbage. Do our sons really have to continue to be guinea pigs in IE? My son almost has to go to secondary school. Do I have to continue my nightmare for 6 years? And I want to respond to everyone. So my son has had so many assessment reports, even since he was 5. And he was so when he was 7 and when he's 11, there's so many assessment reports. It took me so many efforts to get these assessment reports, but no one is willing to act according to the guidelines. So I would like to tell everyone, my son has already been diagnosed for so early. Why should I need to feel these obstacles? I'm already so strong. Maybe some other parents would have given up. I really hope that you will consider the educational policy. I'm not just an individual case. So many parents are like me. I come here today. I really didn't want to come, but I feel so much pain. My story has been heard by so many people. It's been on the newspaper and it's been on TV. But so what? It's only been the same thing for 5 years. Thank you, everyone. Thank you. I think today a lot of parents come here today because they have a lot of courage. And it's not just for their own children. And they really hope that the next generation can benefit. I've already told my story so many times. Yes, we understand. Would you like to take a drink of water? I'll be okay. How about now? Because our meeting only goes to 5:30, and that's rather inhumane. If there's no little break, I think that'll be very difficult, and then it will be difficult to focus. So why don't we take a break now? For those who have not spoken, I want to apologize. I suggest that let's have a 10-minute break. Let's come back at 4:30. And then let's try to finish within an hour. So let's take a break for 10 minutes.